Brussels. Speaking to you from Bratislava today. Thanks a lot to everyone for joining us today, both speakers and our audience. I'm going to be leading today's discussion on investing in innovation with our very special guests. And before I introduce them, I would like to mention a couple of important things. So the first thing is that this event is the first webinar from our Digital Lighthouse series, which is a public-private platform for shaping policy debates in the area of digital transformation and innovations in Central Europe. And this particular webinar is powered by ESET, the founding partner of the Digital Lighthouse Initiative. To briefly introduce the topic, well, I think the debate on investing in innovations couldn't be more timely given the recent news on the EU recovery budget. Following the summit in Brussels last week, national leaders agreed to 1.8 trillion budget and pandemic recovery fund. Out of this sum, 81 billion will be spent on Horizon Europe, the main EU research program, which is unfortunately much less than the innovation community had hoped for. And well, this move is a bit disheartening given the fact that the coronavirus crisis showed how essential research and innovations are when it comes to ensuring that Europe can tackle this kind of unprecedented crisis. And I'm therefore very, very excited to hear what our guests think about the EU recovery plan and how it's going to impact the innovation ecosystem in Europe and Central Europe in particular. Just one more note for the audience, feel free to use the chat section at the bottom part of the screen to ask your questions. We'll make sure to answer them if possible. And now I would like to introduce my speakers today. So firstly, we have Mrs. Marina Ranga. Marina works with the European Commission's Joint Research Center in Seville, Spain. And she's also an associate professor of innovation and entrepreneurship at the University of Warsaw Schools of Management. Then we have Mr. Grzegorz Brochna, Undersecretary of State at the Ministry of Science and Higher Education in Poland. Then we have Mr. Andrew Lee, Public Affairs Liaison at ESET, which is a global success story from Slovakia in the field of cybersecurity. And last but not least, we're welcoming Mr. Dusan Velic, who's an expert for innovations, science and research at the Ministry of Investments, Regional Development and Informatization of the Slovak Republic. So a very exciting lineup of speakers, if I may say so, and I'm very excited to be meeting you all. Unfortunately, this time it is possible only through the virtual means, but still, I'm looking forward to the fruitful discussion. So let's kick off the discussion with I would say the most high level, let's say the EU perspective on the EU recovery plan. So I would like to give the floor to Marina to ask her what is your perspective on the EU recovery plan and how it's going to impact the innovation ecosystem in Europe.
Thank you, Susanna. Thanks a lot for having me in this very exciting conversation. I congratulate you for having this idea. Indeed, it's a very timely initiative. And it's also very good for us to debate the issues that are now emerging, not only in light of the recovery plan, but also in light of the new challenges that have come together with this coronavirus crisis. The recovery plan is indeed a very important and very useful and necessary tool. But on the other hand, it does not solve things by miracle. We are still facing the same problems that we had before, and we are still looking at a lot of challenges that are now taking place in Europe, in the European research and innovation system overall, but also in the national and regional innovation systems too. I can talk most from the perspective of the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, which is a sort of horizontal science and innovation service to the Commission. And we are working with several DGs, Directorate General, that trust on our expertise for both a policy impact assessment and also policy analysis in view of launching new policies. So policy analysis this is something that we do quite a lot, and also trying to assess the effectiveness of different tools. So from this point of view, I can say that all these new conditions together have actually raised a new landscape for us. We have seen, especially the coronavirus, has seen the importance of these regional, territorial mechanisms of coordination. So the transition from the national level to the regional level is all the more important. On the other hand, the coordination with the EU authorities and policies is even more important, and we are entering here this level of the this field of the multi-level governance. That becomes all the more important. We are dealing with a lot of problems that have remained unsolved within the national borders and also at the regional level. And the innovation, research and innovation performance across the European Union is still largely uneven. I prepared a couple of slides here for you just to show you in more clear terms what I'm talking about in terms of innovation performance at the regional level in Europe. Allow me to share a screen with you where I can show you this. For instance, the Regional Innovation Scoreboard gives us this map of regional innovation performance in Europe, where the color code means basically the yellow, the oranges, the red are the modest or the lower performing innovators, whereas the greens and the blues are the more advanced performers. I think this picture is very telling. We basically have a Europe spread into, it's basically two halves here, the green half and the orange half, and that shows very well the difference in innovation performance. This is a picture of, based on indicators of last year, 2019, Regional Innovation Scoreboard 19. But the same source gives us also a picture of the change in innovation performance over 10 years, 2011-2019. And that's even more interesting because it shows the same disparities between regions, but we can also see the progress, assess the progress. Some regions have increased their performance, others have decreased. You have here, for instance, those that are in green are those that generally increase their performance, whereas those in blue and purple are those lagging behind. And that is indeed a very clear sign that cohesion policy, regional development policies, research and innovation policies still have a long way to go to cover these development gaps. If we look a little bit further, we see that overall, indeed, the performance increased for 159 regions and decreased for 79. That's a clear sign that the better performing has a significant advance. But in fact, when we're looking on a finer grain, we see that the problematic issues still remain, particularly in this modest innovators category, where only 45% of the regions have recorded some increase compared to the other groups, innovation leaders 55, moderate innovators 80%, strong innovators 64. So you see, we do have a lot of disparities in Europe, which means that we need to have a new vision, a new thinking about the usefulness and the effectiveness of these research and innovation investments. I don't want to get into a discussion on values and amounts, how much will be given for this or that. I would like to go more into a discussion of the effectiveness of the mechanisms to spend that money. And especially now, even the European authorities have started to realize that the effectiveness of research and innovation investments are not the same throughout Europe. There are a lot of factors that influence this absorption capacity. For instance, the technology development is not the same. The distance from the technology frontier matters. The density, the thickness or thinness of innovation ecosystems matters. And also, very importantly, one element that comes more and more into the debate is the quality of the governance and the quality of the political systems that govern our countries. Because there are some critical elements in these political systems overall that have a strong influence on the success of research and innovation policies. We are talking here about the transparency, about the respect to the rule of law, about the coordination between national and regional governance authorities. We also deal with a lot of discussion, debate about bribery and corruption. All these indicators now come to the front. And we realize that the landscape becomes much more complicated. It's not just a matter of increasing the investment on research and innovation. This has become a myth that is no longer stands true. We have to broaden the perspective and take into account other factors that matter, the regional dimension, the political dimension, the governance in particular, and the effectiveness of our institutions. Institutional capacity is also key. The skills of the people, the skills of the administration, and on top of that, we have the digitalization, Industry 4.0, all this digital revolution, coming with a new range of skills that are needed, and that, if not managed properly, is likely to widen the gap further rather than closing it. And this is where we are. It's getting more and more complicated every day.
Yeah, it's a very tricky situation indeed, very complex, a very interesting one indeed. Thank you so much, Marina, for your input, and I would like to pass the floor to Mr. Grzegorz Brochna and to ask him how he sees things in the EU recovery plan and the potential for the Central European and the Polish innovation ecosystem to develop further.
Thank you. I think the answer to your question is already contained in the question itself. You talk about recovery plan. It should be a plan indeed, rather than a shopping list. It should not be just spending money fast. It should be well planned. Even the investment is a short-term, relatively short-term investment. It should be planned with a long-term perspective, because it is not just recovery plan. It's a plan for recovery and increasing resilience especially of Europe. So talking about the resilience, that means that we have to look forward into longer perspective. From my point of view, what is really crucial here is to invest in research infrastructures. This is because when we invest in the research infrastructures, we first have this fast effect. They need some concrete and steel, and they can boost the economy immediately. But more important, they require usually high technologies. Sometimes technologies, they do not even exist today. And therefore, they somehow create a push for innovation just at the level of the construction. But the real goal of those research infrastructure is to support the innovation system in the future. And therefore, our ministry submitted a list of research infrastructures which we would like to finance from the recovery plan. Talking about the resilience, I mean, it is not guaranteed that the next crisis will be due to some new virus. I mean, we can have big problems due to some other phenomenon. I mean, this could be, I don't know, for example, a big storm on the sun, which will disturb our energy network, power networks. It could be a gamma ray burst in our galaxy, which will blind all our satellites or our communication, right? This could be the change of the magnetic poles of the Earth, when we will be without the protection against high radiation from the space. We don't know. Therefore, I believe that the result of the recovery plan should be creating two new instruments. One I call Center for Threat Prevention and Mitigation. I mean, we need to have an institution trying to predict what kind of crisis could happen. To some extent, it is already performed by Joint Research Center, but we need to more focus on this kind of prevention and mitigation system. The second instrument we need is a kind of rapid response mechanism. We should reserve some funds, or we need to create tools to be able to trigger those mechanisms in case of need. I mean, this time with the COVID crisis, we were surprised and we had to act suddenly. We were forced to shift the funds, to invent something in a hurry. We should be better prepared in the future. We should have mechanisms already existing, already planned, which we just need to trigger, and then they will help us to fight the crisis. I think that's all for the question number one.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rochna, for your remarks. I would like to pass the floor now to Mr. Dusan Velic from the Slovak Ministry of Informatization. From the recent news, we know that Slovakia is one of the top recipients of the EU recovery funds from the European countries. So I'll be really interested to see how Slovakia is planning to invest in further building its innovation infrastructure, and how the current situation is going to impact the further development of the innovation ecosystem in Slovakia and Central Europe.
Well, thank you for being with you. First of all, I would like to convey regards from our ministry, Veronika Remišová, from our ministry, abbreviation MIRI, the Ministry of Investment, Regional Development and Informatization. Well, I try to be short because I really don't know how much time we have here. And point is, like, European point of view is of course different because the numbers of Western Europe is different. It was shown nicely in the picture. So from that point of view, Slovakia has a lot to catch up, and we are ready to do that. I think very simple answer from Slovakia is that with innovation and we kind of like a progress in technology, our society was kind of like, very hesitant in Slovakia because their two ministry was dealing with that. There's a Ministry of Economy, a Ministry of Education and Science, Research and Development. Now we have a new ministry which has a potential and also a political will to unify this effort. And basically that's what we are planning to do, put money in the innovations from the one budget, or at least to orchestrate from one budget. And the idea is to create something like a knowledge clusters, where the main idea is effectively connect universities with industry or public domain. So we really communicate well, and we can really improve the European innovation scoreboard number, not only per number, but we need that really diversification of the industry, and also like a higher level of education towards entrepreneurship. That's the way how to fight any crisis. So that's our position.
Thank you very much, Mr. Velic.
Your sound.
My sound is off. Okay, I think it's fine now. I'd like to ask Andrew what he thinks, and what is his perspective as from his position as an actor of a very innovative private sector company when it comes to the post-COVID innovation efforts on the EU level and on the level of national governments, and what role can be played by the private sector and innovative players such as ESET.
Yeah, thank you, Susanna. I'd like to say really that innovation is the fruit of a well-cultivated plant. So we don't suddenly have innovation without all of the things that underlie innovation. And one of the challenges, and Marina alluded to this, is that we still face the same issues that we had before COVID. So COVID is one wrinkle, and as has already been pointed out as well by Mr. Rochna, that you know, the levels of innovation and the levels of investment are not the only thing that shape the environment. We must focus on other things, what can cause disasters, and there can be other things that can happen. Unfortunately, a lot of things can all happen at once in some cases, and so it's about building not only resilient systems, but building resilient populations that can support an economy in a difficult world as things change. And so to get innovation, to get Europe to the forefront of where it wants to be again in terms of innovation, in terms of investment in new technologies, and in terms of building world-class and leading technologies, which is what we want to do. We must look at the very basics of how do we invest in our fundamentals, how do we invest in the soil from which these plants grow. So one of the things that greatly and deeply concerns me, and I live here in Slovakia, but there is the same issues in my home country of the UK and in many other countries that I've observed, is that we have a growing and increasing sense of digital disenfranchisement in terms of the fact that specifically rural areas and perhaps underfunded areas in our countries simply fall further behind in their ability to engage technologically with the rest of their countries, with the peers, and in other parts of the technological landscape that we see. So the question is even more fundamental than, you know, just bringing better education or bringing better funding or something like that, but even the economics of bringing, for instance, fast, high-speed internet to a very rural area where there may be a very small population requires an innovative approach that may not be met by current technologies, that may not be met by commercial companies who don't have that interest in investing that. So one of the things that I hope that the EU will be focusing on, that we'll be able to focus on, is not only building an innovation economy, but understanding that the innovation economy arises from the ability to engage technologically with the modern world, and with innovations such as e-government and so on coming up. If we are further and further leaving behind populations of people who cannot engage in that technology and cannot engage in that system, then I think we see a problem in terms of the incoming talent to companies like ours. How do we foster that? How do we get the next, you know, great innovation from a place where we haven't so far focused, and when funding hasn't necessarily been given? And I'm sure that there are many intelligent young people who are being left behind simply because the digital world is not available to them in the same way that it might be to me in an environment in a well-funded city and so on.
Andrew, thank you very much for pointing out this important aspect of the post-COVID recovery debate, meaning the fact that the COVID has further accelerated, showed the digital gap and the importance of access to connectivity of disadvantaged populations, because this is very key for also equalizing opportunities for everyone, which is something also Marina alluded to at the very beginning, I think. So maybe if we switch the debate towards, let's say, more practical means, so what are the investment tools on the EU level, at national level, which will be available to boost the innovation ecosystems?
Maybe I can say a few words about that, just to bring this whole discussion in context. You know, we are now approaching the end of this current multi-year financial framework, 2014-2020. And preparations are already advanced, underway to prepare the new financial framework 2021-27. That means the entry into force of a series of programs, they are called operational programs, by which EU, the European Commission, channels money to the countries. We have instruments for research and innovation like Horizon Europe. Then we have all the instruments associated to the structural funds, ERDF, Regional Development Funds, ESIF, and so on. So there will be a new configuration of instruments, operational programs coming for the next 7-year period. This is not clear yet because countries are still working on that. Of course, there will be a higher emphasis on everything that is related to the Green Deal, to digitalization, to Europe for people, you know, all these big dimensions, big lines of the European policy. But behind that, we still have to keep in mind that as far as research and innovation is concerned, there is a wide belief that a successful research and innovation is driven by technology. There are several things to discuss here. First is the bridge between research and innovation. These things are often talked about together, but there is a long way from research to innovation. And Central European countries in particular do have a lot of challenges in making this connection. You know, the valley of death is very much present there. So there is a lot of effort that is needed to reinforce these mechanisms that ensure the transition to the market of valuable research results. You need clusters, you need university industry links, you need a higher involvement of companies and SMEs, not just larger companies that can afford to do that, and so on. Then I would like to refer a little bit to the technology aspect, because people think, okay, technology is there, and the issue is how to help those more unfavored to get access to it. It's not just that. It's about who produces that technology, how does it spread, what is the technology absorption capacity, what are the diffusion rates, are we buyers or are we producers? You know, you make it or you buy it. The make versus buy dilemma is more topical than ever. So the option for countries lagging behind or being farther away from the technological frontier is, of course, to improve their capacity to absorb technology that is being diffused by others. That means buying more. Okay, you buy it, you bring it to your country, but then the people who are supposed to use it, they need to build the skills to do that. So that means a training effort in the country that has to be supported properly. There is, and I'm talking now also from, you know, from my professorial perspective, because I'm teaching this basically, and I see a huge need for education and training, not only to students. We often make this confusion. Professionals in their workplaces do need a lot of training to catch up and, you know, get up to date with new management methods, new technology development methods, and all these technology futures analysis, foresight, forecasting, all these are very important tools that have become less and less frequent to use. And that puts all those countries that prefer to be on the buying side, you know, at a disadvantage. I mean, you cannot hope to develop your country only by buying foreign technology. You need to develop productive capacity locally, and that comes in a package with skilled personnel, with skilled researchers, with skilled managers, with digitally literate people, and all that. That requires an important effort. We are now running a program with the JRC, which is looking at industrial transitions in different countries. We are running for such reviews in 4 countries. And 2 of them, Bulgaria and Romania, are looking specifically on digitalization. And we've run questionnaires, online consultations with stakeholders to see what their needs are and so on. And the answers, I mean, it's really a reality check. The need for digital skills is so high, so fantastic at every level, from the highest levels of the administration down to, I don't know, schools and kindergartens, you know, and that requires a huge effort. It's like having to deliver training courses to everyone. Do we have that capacity, or will we create another digital divide that will further enlarge the already existing divides?
Yeah, I think this really is a crucial question, and I think we will get back to the question of digital education and the importance of digital skills in economic restructuring further on in the debate. But before we do that, I would still like to kind of like zoom into the Central Europe and ask Mr. Vrochna and Mr. Velic in particular about the, let's say, the deficiencies in the R&D infrastructure in Central Europe, and how can we set the system so that the CE countries can really benefit from EU funding programs to boost the innovations?
Well, indeed, we are still living in a Berlin Wall shadow. If you look at a map of research infrastructures, especially large research devices, you see that most of them is in the Western Europe. So we need more investment into that. But it is not so difficult to build a new research infrastructure. What is really difficult is to support its use. So I mean, we really need to count now on the synergies between the European framework programs like Horizon Europe and the structural funds. We can use structural funds to build a new infrastructure, but then we have to use framework programs to support research on these infrastructures. We are currently talking to the European Commission on some instruments when this synergy between the framework program and structural funds will be built in. That, for example, some excellent research projects which will be very well received by the reviewers, but they will not get funds because of the shortage of the funds. They can get a seal of excellence, and then they could be financed by the country from the structural funds. So this kind of synergies between the framework program and structural funds, I think it's a very important tool for us to support R&D infrastructures and the use of the research infrastructures in the future.
Thank you very much. Mr. Velic? Can you please unmute yourself?
Yes, I'm sorry. As I started also, I mean, the issues like European issue and Slovakian issues should be common because we're part of the Europe. But like horizons or framework programs, they are a little like more like a horizontal things which should cover everything and provide a certain facility. But it's not a strategic amount of investment in Slovakian or Polish or other countries' research. Therefore, Slovakia must realize that research, science, technology is a strategic issue for society. Therefore, we have to invest on our own much more. So investment is first thing, which is clear, but it's not all about money, because if the environment, the schools and industry is not prepared to communicate, this is not going to be effective. So we know that, and we have basically preparing in our ministry MAIRI national plan or program, national program for innovations, where we would like to synchronize all those partners, means universities, governments or governmental ministries, and regions which are represented by industry. And we believe in this communication is really good starting point. And if we change it like in a specific, we are hoping that from the recovery plan, we can start this initiative. And in the period 21-27, we hopefully get some amount of money which can systematically put into this system, so people know for the long term that they are secure in their way of thinking and way of acting. So that's the plan, national program for innovations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Velic. I think that really hits the spot and really complements the debate on the importance of boosting the ecosystem through connecting all the major stakeholders of the ecosystem, be it universities, be it startups, be it bigger technological companies. We really need all those players to be working together, and I think that's key. And that's also the reason why I'm so glad that we have a combination of people from the public sector here and the private sector here. So my next question would be, so what are, most probably for everyone here, so what are the most strategic point of cooperation between the public sector and the private sector with regards to innovations?
If I can start on this one. I think it comes partly back to what Marina mentioned earlier, and the fact that, we don't want to be net buyers of technology from outside of Europe. So I think there are certain things which we should look at in terms of pan-European projects that can enhance the national security of the European project, but also the individual nation states within Europe. And as the technological expertise within our countries grows, we also face technological risk, because the more things that are online, the more things are vulnerable to online attack and so on. And we are also, right now, we're extremely reliant on technology that does not come from Europe. We're highly reliant on Chinese technology. We're highly reliant on American-based technology. And in uncertain times, these are vulnerabilities that we must look at, that we must understand and consider in terms of building the infrastructure within Europe and what we can do. Now, Europe has already made strides, for instance, with the Galileo satellites and so on. And there's the project, the Gaia X project, which is looking at government cloud for Europe and so on. But I think one of the important factors to the European success will be long-term being able to plan between the private and the public sectors, these pan-European projects which bring security, and not just cyber security, but physical cyber security and hardware security to the platforms and the technological advances that we need to make within Europe to maintain the security of the European project.
Thank you, Marina. It seemed like you have something to add.
Yes, I do actually, because this is one of the critical aspects of collaboration between university and industry, and not only actually innovation stakeholders in general. You know, if you look along the innovation chain, you would see different patterns of cooperation subject to the maturity of the project that we are talking about. So in the early stages, when we have a predominance of basic research, university research that is largely funded by public funds, then of course you would have a larger involvement of university academics, public research labs, and so on. As you go up along the chain, or as the technology maturity level increases, then you would have at the top, when the technology is closer to the market, then you would have more private investor, more companies, some angels, some venture capital, and so on. But in the middle, that's what we call the valley of death. It's a very dangerous place where you don't have much of public funds and you don't have much of private funds either, because the risk is very high. And this is the point where the gap has to be covered. The European programs, particularly Horizon Europe, tried to fill this gap and came with some instruments to fill this middle part of the evolution of a technology to the market. But still, there are some important tools that are now being active, but very few people and countries are actually skilled enough to use it. And this has been one of our most important efforts with the GRC and also with DG Grow, DG Connect, to encourage more and more people to make use, to get to know these instruments and to use them. But it's difficult. It requires a certain level of knowledge on innovation and technology, which most people do not have. On the other hand, we have prepared a platform which encourages technology partnerships between regions. It's called the Smart Specialization Platform, and it has 3 categories of partnerships: in energy, in agri-food, and in the broader category of industrial modernization. And here you have a lot of technology, from industry 4.0 to tourism to medical technology, everything. I invite you to have a look at the S3 platforms to get an idea. The problem here is that the partners tend to coagulate around the same old networks. The entry of new players in this is quite difficult. So the participation of regions and the partners, institutions from Central and Eastern Europe is rather limited. And this comes again to demonstrate that gap, the distance to the technology frontier, the old networks that perpetuate themselves, and access to new entrants becomes more difficult if they don't have the skills to speak the same language, to be on the same page. So there are instruments that are available, but the access to that seems rather limited to those who are already technologically advanced enough to be able to build on that. And yeah, we do have a problem here.
Thank you so much, Marina, for your perspective. I would also like to ask Mr. Wrochna for his perspective on the collaboration between public and private sector when it comes to innovation in Poland, since it's one of the biggest markets in Central Europe, and therefore it does have its specificities. So I would like to hear your perspective on the collaboration. What are the next challenges and opportunities?
I think that the biggest problem with private sector in supporting high impact innovation is the fear of risk. They consider just small improvements in their processes as innovation, and they are reluctant to take any risk to implement a real high impact innovations. I think this is a particularly important problem in Europe. It is somewhat different in US, I believe, because the US founders, people who came to the new continent, they already took a big risk. So today's Americans, they have somehow better acceptance to risk in their DNA. In China, they have a huge internal competition, so they have to take big risks to survive. Whereas in Europe, I mean, we do afraid of risks, and therefore the private sector, I mean, it's not supporting innovations very much. Therefore, the role of public players, of public funds, is to reduce the level of the risk, not to eliminate it, because we still need to somehow teach them to grow them to accept the risk, but to reduce the risk to the level which is acceptable, so they can start the projects in real high impact innovation.
Thank you very much. And I would also like to ask for the perspective of Mr. Velic and what he thinks about the role of the private sector innovators in Slovakia in boosting the innovations here.
Well, again, in Slovakia, we have like those two kind of like the two sides of the same coin. We have huge corporations, which they have innovation programs or development programs, usually in their own countries. So basically, to get involved in them, it's of course possible, but it's not number one priority for them. And then we have a lot of small and medium enterprise companies which need that. But on the other side, maybe that's another. Agree in the sense it's a matter of risk something, but I would say they're living on very narrow margins. The competition in Europe is huge. Added value in our industry is really low, so they're living on the low, very narrow margin. Therefore, they cannot afford to invest. It's not like they are afraid to risk. I mean, it's die or live. And I think I agree that it's really kind of like a valley of death, which we have to support. And that's a program which we are introducing right now. It's that we are trying to invest money into those companies along with the university. So basically those two doors open, because we have to acknowledge, I mean, people at universities and people in industry don't speak the same language. And we have to teach them, or not teach them, offer them the round table to discuss it and learn to understand everybody's needs. So I believe this is the huge potential to help those companies to utilize the schools with the state money to help them to go over the valley of death. And then when they trust us that they can pay off from this, they can be more active and involve own money into the innovation, because we know in Slovakia, involvement of the private money is one of the worst in Europe. It's maybe less than 30%. In Europe, it's maybe on average 70%. So we have to build on the trust that university can help, and companies are capable to really go into the competition with something which makes them stronger on the market, although it's difficult.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And I think we have already touched upon this question, but I would like us to kind of like think about it further, which is the question of the digital skills and the collaboration between the EU and member states on kind of like further developing digital and entrepreneurial skills among students and the wider population, and supporting obviously businesses in doing that as well. So my question would be, how can the EU and member states work together in supporting this transformation in education systems?
Well, that's a question for me, or just general?
It could be for you. We can start with
well,
you.
I mean, guys, I hate to say that, but I have to leave. I don't know how we schedule this discussion.
Yeah, I mean, we're supposed to. I know we need to end the discussion by 4 p.m. sharp, so we still have 14 minutes.
Okay, good. So I can probably stay because I have another meeting. Being a professor at university and being a scientist, I know it from first hand. I mean, let's face it. I mean, universities around Europe are competitors. Right? I mean, sure, we can share their own values, we can share the general wisdom from Bologna principles, yes, but it's a competition. So clearly we have to collaborate, but on the other side, as I said, every country is realizing more and more that educated people are strategic issue or strategic value of every country. So as Slovakia, we have to be very careful to support on research, not necessarily Slovakian research, of course. Research is only one, the good one or the other one. So we need to internationalization of our Slovakian research, but we have to really build on excellence and the quality. And it's easier to say than to do it. So we really need to concentrate the money and to really go towards this direction. Of course, it's great to be a partner to the best schools in Slovakia, in Europe. But first of all, we have to be on that level to really be a decent partner. But of course, networking is fantastic and being part of the Europe is a big advantage.
Mm-hmm. Marina, what is your perspective as someone who works at the European Commission, well, the Joint Research Center?
There's a lot of activity of all sorts now around this topic. There are also different teams of researchers within the JRC working on that. In my team, I already mentioned this digitalization program that we are, the industrial transition program that we are running, and 2 out of the 4 countries where we conduct such industrial transition reviews do focus on digitalization. And these kind of investigations that we are doing now are aimed to support the efforts of the respective countries to meet the criteria established by the European Commission for a transition towards a smarter economy. There are also very interesting efforts in DigiConnect. I would just like to flag to you a very recent report that was issued by DigiConnect, which is called DigComp. It's about digital competencies that the European Commission looks into and recommends to countries how to implement, how to build, how to develop DigComp. I just saw the document a couple of days ago, so it's really very, very new. And there are also very important collaboration projects across different DGs, for instance, between DG Research and DG Grow, between DG Connect and us, for instance, the different kinds of combinations, different angles from which we can look at this issue, be that with the students or with companies or with the SMEs and so on. So this has really allowed the development of a very broad range of projects with different perspectives. The new operational programs that will take place from next year do address that, and there will be a lot of investment available for that. So again, in order to attract that money, you need to have quality projects. Who will prepare those quality projects? Are they coming from your universities, from your administrations? You have to be very careful with the quality of the people who prepare that. I'm talking about this because I'm working on a daily basis on training the people who prepare those projects. So, there's a whole chain that needs to be followed in order to end up with quality projects that successfully attract the money. This is why I'm saying it's not just a matter of how much money is available. It's a matter of how do you get to that and how do you spend it most effectively for your country and for your region.
Yes, I understand. Thank you very much, Marina. One more question towards Andrew. Andrew, I'd like to ask you, we're talking about digital education. How can the private sector kind of help that transition as well? So what would be the perspective from ESET and from you as a person who kind of sees all the talent with technical skills and the need for increased technical skills? What can the private sector players do, and if it's enough, if it's only the private sector players, and what is the kind of the space for collaboration with the private sector, with the public sector? Sorry.
I think it's a very broad question, obviously, but I think, you know, I mean, of course, ESET is a technology company. We largely exist with digital technologies, and we require high levels of technological expertise from a range of different platforms and skills, everything from, you know, video editing up to cryptography. So we're talking about a wide range of technological expertise, and of course digital skills are something that is very important to us, so we obviously provide a lot of our own internal training, but we have already collaborated with universities within Slovakia to create programs which allow students to directly understand what would be required to work in a sector such as ours. Unfortunately, these things have sometimes rocky roads, and there is also, you know, there's also a tension. I think this is an important thing to understand, and I'm sure Marina will also comment on this. Is that, you know, there is a basic difference between the needs of a company in terms of the digital needs that we do, and the need for a person studying a technology to be able to do basic research and those types of things, which can lead to its own type of innovation. So I think that there are definitely channels for collaboration, and I think one of the important ways that we can do that is to make sure that we're having the conversation, as Mr. Velic has said, that, you know, we sit around the table and discuss what the needs of industry are, what the needs of people are. But we should also be aware that in doing that, you know, the needs of business are not necessarily the most paramount thing when you're talking about the capabilities of universities to do basic research. Yes, it would be lovely to have fully trained people coming out of universities able to work directly in our companies, but I think that's an unrealistic goal. And I don't necessarily think that that's the right goal. However, the skills do need to be relevant, and that's where I think public sector can be very helpful, is to have that seat at the table where we're saying these are the types of things that we're looking for. These are the types of basic research that need to be done to actually complement what we're trying to do as a business.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rochna, do you have any remarks to add to that? I mean, the importance of increasing digital skills and the overall let's say increase connection between the private sector and public sector when it comes to developing the new generation of skilled workers.
Well, I do not afraid so much about developing digital skills of young people. I believe that the next generation we have already coded in the DNA. It's a different story with entrepreneurial skills. I mean, you cannot just teach them. You have to grow people. You have to give people the opportunity to develop those skills. This is much more difficult. What we plan in our ministry is to support more students' scientific clubs. We've realized that the students in those clubs, they make wonderful things. They create cars which are able to travel many kilometers with just a droplet of fuels. They create airplanes powered by solar cells. They create robots to investigate the planet Mars, things like that. So we believe that supporting more this kind of student activities is an excellent tool to develop the entrepreneurial skills. And concerning the cooperation of the European and the member state level, I believe that the competition announced by European organizations like European Space Agency, for example, which are addressed to those kinds of students' clubs, it's an excellent opportunity to develop those kind of skills, and I would strongly recommend that.
Thank you very much for all of your interesting remarks. I think our time is closing to an end. And on this note, I would like to thank to all of you, both our remarkable guests and the participants. As I mentioned at the very beginning, this was the first webinar out of our much longer Digital Lighthouse series. where we talk about the digital transformation of Central Europe. And the next webinar will be on particularly on the topic of automation and the future of work, which is also a topic which very much resonates across the whole EU and Central Europe in particular. So please stay tuned. And thank you very much again. And well, we look forward to the upcoming discussions.
Pleasure meeting you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you meeting you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for organizing it.